just to kind of set everything up. First, I know that what we promised everyone is that they'd walk away with some ideas around always-on engagement. Angie, you're going to talk about kind of how to create shows versus just content. And then Kristen, you're going to share with us like trends and insights to help what's emerging technology platforms and what we're seeing out there. So Megan, obviously with you, how did it all start? You had your portfolio, COVID hit, kind of tell us your story.
Yeah, so when COVID hit, we were about 1 month out from our next large scale flagship in-person event. So the good news of that was we were really able to quickly pivot, and my favorite word, and stand up a virtual version of this in-person event. We had our speakers already booked, the content was developed, so quick pivot. What we saw was really high engagement from our customers, from our partners, a great opportunity for our coworkers to reach out to their customers to kind of talk about things that we learned. And then COVID didn't necessarily end quite as quickly as we had thought or hoped. So then it was the what next. And so we did have this portfolio of our proprietary events. And rather than kind of doing these one-off individual instances, we really thought about how are we going to engage our customers going forward. And so from that was born the CDW Tech Talk series, which in its onset was 5 individual events once a month over 3 days, consisting of 7 one-hour sessions.
And Matt, how did you guys get together? So how did that partnership look? How did the beginning?
Megan and I have known each other in the industry for a long time. And, it was one of those where I think we all did it at one point where, the pandemic had started and you start reaching out to your network of what are you seeing and what's happening and is this real? So, I mean, let's all jump back to, when was it? March, somewhere around that time, that, we got on the phone and, we were doing some outreach and it was like, what do you guys got going on? And then it started with, we just had this virtual event, but, now we've seen and felt and stood this thing up, what is the next thing? And by the way, I've got these constituencies that I need to serve and I have this portfolio with different types of objectives. And, we need to figure out as a virtual platform, what's out there. And I think, again, 18 months back, we've seen such a pantheon of new event tech that, you'll start to help us to figure out how to sift through. But at the time it was what's out there, what do we need to create? And that was where, we went back to a bunch of really smart people that, smarter than me, but on the strategy and the tech and all these other pieces and figured out that a custom solution that helped to serve for your sponsorship community, your attendee community, your seller community, how do we solve for the, individual, and I don't want to say virtual event because it's not, it's a digital experience and other pieces. How can we put something that's flexible in place that's going to serve a longer need? And that's what started the conversation and, what was a long-running project.
Yep. So, custom was obviously an option for you versus a SaaS solution.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to let everyone know it's not one or the other, right? You can have both. Mm-hmm. So how did you use it and what did that look like? And we can run the video in the background, just kind of showing folks.
Yeah, so that is our kind of walkthrough of our virtual event hub. And I was fairly adamant that if we were doing a virtual experience, a digital experience, it was going to be an experience. It wasn't going to be your standard, everyday webinar webcast. And so we were able to bring in what are the things that are true to our brand, true to our experience that our customers are used to, and make that virtual or digital. And so we stood up the hub. As Matt mentioned, I have 3 different audiences that I have to serve. I have our customers who are coming to us for thought leadership, for solutions to the challenges that they're having. I have our partner community who is really the lifeblood of CDW. It's what we sell, it's how we serve our customers, and so we need to make sure our partners are getting in front of our customers to solve our customers' challenges. And then it's our sellers and our coworkers who need to reach out to our customers and stay engaged, really help them solve those challenges. And so, as you mentioned, out of the box is great, but for us, when we looked at our objectives and what are we truly trying to achieve, custom was where we went.
And I think when I look at that, it's authentic too.
Yep.
It doesn't look like anyone else. It is your environment. It's the story that you can really tell and get behind. And I think that's something that we have to all think about. It's not the platform that drives the experience. It's the brand that designs the solution. and it has to be authentic to you. If you wouldn't do it live, then don't do it digital.
Yep.
So were you measuring? What is the what does the analytics say, and how quickly did you act on those analytical details?
Yeah, we measure always and often, and we so much so as looking at it when we have the tech talk immediately after, doing what's on fire, what do we need to solve for now, then letting it kind of run a month and see what are we learning from, and then having quarterly and reviews by the half and things like that. One of the things that data told us after 2020 was that our customers are changing, and they don't want to come to a 3-day event and attend all 7 one-hour sessions.
They did before, but they don't now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the world is changing, and this new normal is feeling a little more normal, and also all of the other things that are going on. And so what we did from 2020 to 2021 was looking at data, looking at behavior and customer preferences, turned the 3-day, 7-session tech talks into 1-hour weekly tech talks, each one consisting of 3 bite-sized, really dynamic mixed media segments. They air 1 o'clock Central Time. We're wrapping up right now, a little nervous not being in touch with my team, but I'm sure it's fine.
It's going to be fine.
But so you're able to now just over lunch, hop on for an hour, get some really quick hit, actionable insights. But also, if you're busy, if you've got a meeting or you just don't want to join us at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, we turn the hub into an always on destination that people can go and now view all of the segments and all of the webcasts on demand, interact with our partner community whenever you want. So if you can't sleep at 3 a.m. and managing risk is really important to you, you can go to the hub and consume some content that way.
But kudos to you in that regard, because we work with a lot of people that they'll measure something, but they won't necessarily act on it.
Yep.
And you've measured and acted, and that's been a virtuous cycle throughout this entire time, and continuing to challenge us and our team from both a redevelopment of the user interface and the user experience, or revamp of the agenda, but then also the production and content, and how do you make it an interesting story that you want to consume. And I think that the ability to tell a story and do it over the course of what is now going to be an 18-month engagement has been it's a labor of love. You got to stay on top of that. You can't let that, you can't rest on your laurels. You got to keep doing, because the field is getting so much more crowded. But you've upped the ante on terms of the sophistication level and what you can do from an interactive, like all those things comes from constantly relooking and surveying your audience and all the constituencies as to what they really want to get out of this.
And beta testing different things and different textures and different approaches to the content too.
Yep.
I think it's a great time to try new things and different things.
Absolutely.
So what's one key takeaway that we could get from you if you were going to give that advice to anyone?
Yeah, I think my biggest learning was really, taking a big bite of humble pie and realizing it's okay to not have all the answers. I think a lot of us in the room here are used to being the ones that people turn to, and everything's buttoned up, right? We're the duck that looks super graceful on top of the water, no matter how fast our legs are kicking. And my facade was blown because I didn't know what to do. And being able to, with humility, accept that, and then also turn to partners and other teams to help me figure out what is the answer, what do we do from here. And so I think that was one of the biggest learnings, is it's okay to not know everything. And we're so much stronger in numbers. Even being here, some of the conversations over the past day, just it feels so good because it's filling my tank and it's reminding us we're not alone in this.
Yeah. So let's talk about content a little bit more, in storytelling. So Angie, why don't you, this is where we turn it on you a little bit. Why don't you share with us about what your journeys look like and how you started your digital strategy?
Yeah, well, we're kind of lucky in that we had the forethought to build a digital strategy many years ago. It's been foundational to the work that we've been doing. I, unfortunately or fortunately, was a part of the 2008 Let's Cancel Every Event in the World. And I was at a large enterprise brand at the time. And, we went from, spending tens of millions of dollars on one event and having $0, but still had the need to motivate, recognize, and educate a sales organization. And it sucked, going from in-person to digital. It didn't motivate them. It didn't really educate them because the views weren't there. They didn't have the tools that they needed to be successful. So I feel like I've been down this path before. And so this slide that you see up on the screen sort of talks a little bit about our journey in where we started in March of 2020 and where we just ended in April of 2021. And it certainly was quite an evolution over that time, to the degree that we completely scratched the digital platform and experience that we had from the beginning. And as a high-risk taking company who has a really large palette to develop on their own and try something out, we decided to take the hard path and build our own platform. And with that, we landed on building on top of Swoogo. Although that wasn't the only integration that was included. We used Kaltura for streaming, looked at there's a lot of great companies out there that do streaming. We work with a little boutique agency, BW Events, that sort of acts as an extension to our team and integrated things like Chatlio and Social Live. So that's where we are today, and building it from scratch meant that when we needed to change a line of content or we needed to change just a pattern grid on a screen, we were able to do that ourselves.
Yeah. So so Swoogo, I mean, the nice thing about Swoogo is they've always had an open API integration. So that was kind of like the core of who Swoogo was anyway.
Yeah.
And then you're one of the few companies who could actually build the customization on the inside out. And that's been really successful for you. And has there been any like aha moments? Like, have you discovered any habits of the digital community that you didn't know through the live experiences?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just like the rest of us, we're all pretty exhausted by this, right?
Yep.
Over time, we had, just in our recent Team 21, we had a 275% growth in our customer touch year over year, which is ridiculous and crazy. Something I don't love to say out loud because I'm like, can't we just do it in person again? And at the same time, it was such an incredible opportunity to have more eyeballs on something that will be a part of our expanding our breadth of coverage moving forward. So I think that some of the things that we learned over time became part of our key platform enhancements. So we had done a deep dive ourselves as voyeurs of 80 plus industry events, many of yours out there in the audience.
We call that an audit.
We did an audit. And we were just trying to consume as much as we could. And we identified 8 key areas that our customers had talked about and that we were super frustrated about. Anything from personalization from the moment that you open the platform and through the entire experience. Thank you, VivaStream, for helping us get there. To the universal search. I mean, we all use Google every day in our life. And for the life of me, when we go to a digital platform and we're not able to do that is, kind of ridiculous, but turns out apparently that's hard to do. But we got there. But these were some of the things that we learned, from our customers and our own experience along the way.
And I would encourage everyone, we do this with other customers too, as we call those the design principles, right? Identify 4 to 6 principles that no matter what you're doing, that is what's, you have them too. Oh, look at you. Okay,
Who do you think I learned from?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest aha, and I know this was a part of your question, was it's just not a 1-to-1 ratio, right? In person to digital. And we're all like, yeah, I know that. But for God's sakes, we're still trying to do that in many ways. And we talk about networking. It's just never going to be the same. Certainly we can do some things to help foster that, absolutely. But I think that besides the 1-to-1 ratio, really less is more. And we completely overprogrammed at the front end of this because we had so much great content to give. And it's what our customers said they wanted in a live environment. And now we've learned that about 30% or less of what we do in person works in one of our flagship programs. And outside of that, for webinars or webcasts or some of our smaller series,
Yep.
it's probably like 10%
Yeah.
of what it would have been before.
Yep. I think we have to kind of take the customer through the sales pipeline, right? And start to figure out the touch points around that engagement versus just looking at your portfolio and backing into that. But if you use the sales funnel and start to say, how am I talking to them one-to-one, one-to-few,
Yeah.
one-to-many, you might find some harmony in that design versus just looking at it as a program versus a portfolio.
Yeah, and for us, it's different because I run strategic events, which are our customer programs, and field marketing is a part of our team as well. And that customer is different, the message is different, and how we measure success is very different. We're lucky in that we are following the life cycle of a prospect, either top of the funnel or moving them through an acceleration phase. And we know what they're buying, how much they're interacting with us.
Yep.
And boy, there is so much data in this digital world. And before, it was how many leads did we capture at the booth today?
Exactly. And so that kind of leads us, so this is first building your design principles so that you can make sure no matter where you're going, how you're doing it, you're consistent, because I think attendees need to know that you know them. And then the second thing is, how has the content kind of changed, right? Because the content from live events is, keynote speaker, hand the baton, they go to the next person, but we all know that really doesn't work in storytelling digitally. So how have you done that?
Well, I would just
a diagram.
I would just like to acknowledge that the only reason I have slides is because we changed this talk track a little bit overnight, and I was trying to share with Lisa what I would talk about. She's like, you should just show those slides. So forgive me, this is supposed to be a dialogue. But I do just want to mention that something that we didn't get an opportunity to hear from Meg much earlier, and I know hopefully she can talk about her epiphany that she had along the way, but we too, as consumers, wanted to create a media experience. We wanted to produce a show, and in this world of digital, we knew that the entertainment value needed to be the thing we hung our hat on. So we were inspired by Netflix series, and oh my God, Bridgerton was happening during all this.
Yes.
Such a great show.
The best.
But besides that,
those are those midnight movies.
Yeah, those midnight movies. Besides having a host and an anchor and advertising and trailers, we produced trailers for every single piece of content. We used pop culture words. If the session was about scaling agile and becoming a scrum master, we used pop culture to create a really fun trailer to get people excited to do that. And so we told ourselves that we were now in the business of creating media experiences, and it really translated well for our audience because they're typical software and IT developers. And we sort of knew their sense of humor and knew about this time they needed to be entertained.
And in bite-sized pieces too. We call them TikToks instead of TikToks.
Yeah.
You can have a lot of fun by using vocabulary and terminology that people can relate to.
Sure.
So thank you. Do you want to add to that, Megan?
Yeah. She teed me up, so I feel like I have to go there.
You have to.
So I did have an epiphany. I am a bit of a Marvel nerd, and so I was watching one of the Marvel series, I believe it was Winter Soldier and Falcon, and I had this epiphany that what Disney and Marvel are doing are taking these movies. We used to go to the movie theater. We used to sit in a room for 2 hours and stay very contently engaged with that content, and we're just not doing it anymore. Partly because we couldn't, but our behaviors have changed. And so what Marvel did is they have now broken out these series to 6-week runs, and one after the other, you go from show to show. And I was like, I texted Matt and the team with a lot of memes and GIFs. And I was like, this is what we're doing. I'm doing something right if I'm doing what Disney's doing. We're taking this big piece of content, in person, 3-day event, and breaking it down to these 1 hour and also 15-minute segments within it. And to your point, Angie, about the experience is we've also learned that the webcast is our hub. And we have all of these different spokes now that drive it. One of the things that we're seeing just from our editorial, we have teasers, we have recaps that we're creating out of this. Just in Q1 alone, we had over 18,000 views on this content. And you can't get that in person. And so just taking it, and it's not a webcast, it's not a virtual event, it is a a digital experience. And so that is also, we've seen that
And-
come
and-
true and be successful as well.
And to your point earlier, it's a team effort. I mean, you create the story arc, but there's so many more moving parts to each piece of it. You know, that required a UX change, a UI change. The production team had to be brought on. Like, it just has a different feel than the live environment. And there's so many more pieces you have to care for now that just weren't considered at the very front end of when these things were being developed. So again, kudos for, being present and realizing that there's a lot of different pieces you have to care for. And to make it all work, you have to think about it holistically.
We're going to kind of flip the switch a little bit because we've been talking about the customer's point of view, and we've got Kristen here who represents the digital. And Freeman's been doing a lot of research for the last year ourselves, and we have our own developers and our own technology team. So I wanted to kind of pivot to you, and let's just talk about really what kind of changes you're seeing. Like we heard this morning, there's some challenges that we see out there. So how are the customers changing?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kristen, and really I've always been in the digital space. I know I've known Carolyn for quite some time, but I started at CEMA and then always worked for software. So now at Freeman, I'm actually in charge of partnerships. So I actually work with all these hundreds of different technology providers and seeing what's working and what's not working. And I see, the knowledge that has really shifted over this last year. But I think what we're seeing in trends, and I'll break it down to three components, but overall that we're understanding what digital is meant for and what it's not. And I know the keynote and the panelists said that as well. But I think the three trends that I see, and I'll break this down into content, sponsorship, and networking, really, and kind of what those three things are comprised of. And I know you guys spoke about content a little bit earlier, so I won't get into as much of the deliberate and authentic content that I truly believe that we all want and we all need as consumers. But really the biggest trend I see for content is a hybrid toolset approach, especially as we're talking about omni-channels. As a speaker or as an attendee or as a sponsor, you don't want to enter in information twice. You don't want to make it cumbersome. And Michael, you said it earlier, but how do you make things easy and simple? And sometimes in events, we've made things very complex when it doesn't need to be. And why are you collecting that data? So I think from a content perspective, the hybrid toolset approach and not thinking of things in different type of buckets or niches, but how can that really affect your business is where I think the industry will head from a technology perspective.
And I think resoundingly, we've seen that content is still king.
Yep.
But it's not just making it 15 minutes. If it's boring, it still is, you might as well make it 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. But as you can see, like they're spending 6 hours, maybe at the most in technology on your event. So making that content relevant and connected and telling a broader story.
Yep.
What else are you seeing?
So from sponsorships, obviously we hear resounding, it's not working. What's working in the digital space? And I feel like when we all pivoted, the word, but pivoted over this last year, everyone was just jumping on the bandwagon and, having exhibitors be online. And corporate event marketers, you probably did this for the beginning and then you saw the leads aren't working and we knew rethink our business model. So what we did at Freeman, kind of going back into the beginning is, a lot of our clients that we need our sponsors online. And I call it almost like the newspaper approach where you have below the fold and above the fold, but they're all 10 gold sponsors, but they should be the same type of quality. So why are you having 5, above the fold on your screen and then 10 below? So what we're doing, at Freeman and just in general consulting with our customers is how can you create that experience and connect it to content? So subject matter expertise, of course, is going to help with the sponsorship approach, but not just that. One of our clients actually had a really tremendous idea, and going back to custom software, everyone has different features and tool sets, but how can you randomize that type of sponsorship to get the same quality? And what I mean by that is you have all these sponsorships online, and typically our research shows that everything is at the top left-hand side. That's the one that's going to get the most clicks, but what's actually attracting them to go in? So a lot of companies actually put their same exact website online, but that doesn't do anything. What's the content that you want to speak to the audience of that event when you're sponsoring it online? And then on the functionality side, we actually created a randomization of that. So anytime they navigated off the page and then went back to the page, or even when they were on the page, those 10 sponsorships moved around. And you see this a lot in B2C technologies. So we need to start to adapt to what the world wants versus event technologies that have been here 10 plus years ago and creating the same type of things that we see.
So taking the static out of the page, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then
Change it up
obviously
a bit.
networking was a big deal that we talked about
Yep.
this morning. So what have you guys been doing around networking?
Yes. Networking's a big question. Everyone said on the panel that it's a big pain point. You know, I think, you know, there's a couple different things is restrictions. So I know restrictions have been big across a lot of clients that I've seen. So take restrictions out of it. You know, sponsors and attendees should network with one another. So don't try to make one not be able to connect with one another. And I tried to educate that a lot. But I also believe in, if anybody has heard of Clubhouse at all, okay. Clubhouse is something that is very interesting approach to have curated groups that you as the planner can actually, or corporate event marketer can actually put on and really curate these small showcases that they can go in and really connect with one another in a meaningful way. And we just did this with a few of our customers, you're seeing it now, where you can actually pull people up to the stage and speak, which is different than a session, right? Where they're typing in questions online. But how can you, as a speaker, pull someone up on stage just like we're doing now in person? We're missing that. And that's something in networking that's super, super important, not just scheduling one-on-one meetings with people online when they just don't really want to. So Clubhouse is definitely a big trend.
So it's kind of letting people, we were talking to someone yesterday, like they can say, let's talk about sponsorship. And they
Yep.
create a clubhouse or an environment, and then everybody can join at that time. Instead of us controlling the networking, which isn't working,
Yep.
is like instead just enable the networking, and then maybe the networking would start to work. And we are seeing
Heightened
success. We
engagement.
just launched it last month. And so we saw customers having more spontaneous meetings, not hosted by the organizer. So I think that that's definitely something to talk about.
Yep.
So what's closing? What do you kind of see in the future?
Yeah, so what do I see in the future? I know someone touched upon it earlier, it took the words right out of my mouth, is personalization. We see a lot of trends in the B2C environment. I keep saying that, and this industry, I've been very excited over this past year because I think our industry needed this. We needed this time to actually have all of these technologies to really innovate to get to the next level, because frankly, coming from a technology perspective, it's weird for me to say, but we've been behind the times a little bit. I can say that because, you know, we have all these different B2C technologies coming out, and our customers and our attendees are demanding it. So I think my biggest key takeaway is personalization, 365 engagement, and then overall it's just challenging the software providers and really speaking to what is missing and having not making it too feature rich, that it is cumbersome to the environment, but actually helping and making it easy to utilize.
Yep. And I think, like you'll see in the diagram, is data is at the core. It helps inform the content. The content informs the community. So, you know, you can still have live, but make it relevant, make it purposeful, but let the content continue to drive those connections with your brand. So I want to thank all of you guys for joining us today at CEMA. I want to thank everyone for Inside Live to joining us. And mostly I want to thank all of you. It's been 60 minutes, 5 senses. We've all been here. Keep the conversation going. Hopefully you'll remember to keep it always on. You know, engagement's always on. Tell a story, produce your show. And then, you know, when you have new problems, create new ideas.